So I'll call the meeting to order at 4 o'clock. Clerk Fletcher, if you could read the opening remarks.
Sure. It is now 4:01 on May 18th, 2026, and this is the Standing Committee on Telecommunications and Energy of the Assembly of Delegates. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this virtual meeting of the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Telecommunications and Energy will be conducted via remote means only in accordance with applicable law. Members of the public may watch the meeting through live real-time broadcast at www.youtube.com/user/Barnstable County. A public participation guide and meeting documents are available in advance at capecod.gov. The County of Barnstable does not discriminate in the administration of its programs or activities on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or other category protected by state and federal anti-discrimination laws and regulations. Reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available upon request. For more information or file a complaint, please contact Justina Marchak, Barnstable County ADA Non-Discrimination Coordinator at jmarczak@capecod.gov. Call 508-375-6646 or visit www.capecod.gov. Members of the public may also attend the meeting remotely, and that information is available on the website. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Clerk Fletcher. So we will just take a moment of silence to honor our troops who have died in the service of our country and all those serving our country in the armed forces. Okay, if you'd please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
All right. Chair Killian?
Here.
Vice Chair Green?
Here.
Delegate Harder?
Here.
Delegate King?
Here.
Delegate Gallagher?
Here.
Deputy Speaker Frizel?
Here.
And Delegate McKelvey?
Here.
So, Mr. Chair, that is 5 members and 2 alternates. You have a full complement.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So our first item up for discussion is ordinance 2026-14, which is establishing the Power Outage Resiliency Fund. And the purpose of this meeting today is to discuss that particular ordinance and to try to get some background on the purpose thereof. So I believe we have Delegate Gessen with us, and I believe he's the author of this, or certainly one of them. And I wonder if Mr. Gessen could run us through the genesis of how this has come to fruition.
Thank you, Chair Killian. If you could just bear with me, dealing with a little technical difficulty here, but I'll open everything up and be on the screen in just a moment. Hello, good afternoon. Chair Killian, I'll just walk through the ordinance itself that I've written with the help of a number of the co-sponsors that are listed on the ordinance in order to explain the mechanism with which it works, and then I'd be happy to speak a little more about the purpose of it. Would it help if I shared my screen to walk through the ordinance, just so folks can follow along?
If you'd like, I think that'll be fine.
Perfect. I'll do that right now. In summary, in short, what the ordinance does, and then we'll go through the details of how it's drafted and how it does it. It creates a revolving loan fund really based on what we've learned and been able to do very successfully at the county through the Aqua Fund in terms of subsidizing the purchase in the Aqua Funds, the upgrading of septic and sewer systems at essentially no cost to the county by creating a revolving loan fund where the county seeds the fund with money, charges a low interest rate that's much more competitive than anything a consumer would be able to get on the open market for these services, then consumers are able to use that to, in this circumstance, upgrade their homes, retrofit them to be compatible with generator or battery resiliency systems, and then repay that loan over the course of 10 years in this proposal. That way, the county gets that money back. It charges an interest rate to cover expenses of providing that loan. And then consumers across Cape Cod and residents across Cape Cod are able to actually upgrade their homes to be more resilient to power outages like we felt and like we saw this winter on numerous occasions. So the way the ordinance is drafted, it creates what we're calling the Power Outage Resiliency Fund. Throughout the ordinance, it refers to the administrator. That is a broad term, as you can see in the definitions, just to mean the county administrator or anyone who he or she may designate to undertake these roles. Eligible applicants for these loans are going to be year-round people on Cape Cod. It says natural persons. That's essentially to separate it from non-residential commercial properties or LLCs that own homes. This would be specifically for year-round residents of Cape Cod. And one slightly more complicated aspect of the ordinance is as proposed, it currently sets a flexible maximum rate. So we want to give the administrator maximum flexibility to set rates that make financial sense with these small dollar loans, because these loans are so small, because there's obviously overhead when it comes to administering them. Unlike necessarily an aquafund ordinance, which is usually larger in size, it made sense to us to create some flexibility with what these loans can be capped at while still making sure they're affordable. And Delegate Gallagher actually had the idea of tying it to the prime rate, which is what a number of legislatures do when they create flexible rates. It's also the primary rate that banks use to track the mortgage rates nationally. And that just allows us, and there's folks that are much more knowledgeable on this, but effectively that rate is at 6.75% right now. And the idea is it tracks with the national interest rates. That way, when interest rates are high, it goes slightly higher, and it tracks them at a level that provides the county with sufficient flexibility that if we're in a high cost of borrowing environment, that means the county's also borrowing at more expensive rates. We're also able to run this program in a way that makes fiscal sense. All of that also to really emphasize that this is the maximum rate set by ordinance. And the reason to make it more flexible is so that the people that are running this program aren't handcuffed in a fiscally strained environment, but they can always set a lower rate. Like the Aqua Fund has a maximum rate, but they still offer 0% loans. And the idea here would be that there would be some sort of income-based loans. The fund is established. It's authorized to give loans to residents of Barnstable County. The loan terms, I've already addressed some of them, but the maximums that the ordinance sets out are at $5,000 per applicant. The term of years to pay back the loan would not exceed 10 years. The maximum interest rate would be 1% above that prime rate that we discussed. And that would be at the time of issuance of the loan, where that prime rate would be looked at. And then critically, in order to mirror what the Aqua Fund has been so successful at doing, where we're matching people that are most in need with rates and other resources that most make the service accessible to them. In this ordinance, the administrator is able to essentially create criteria to prioritize who's able to be most eligible for this benefit, which is, again, a $5,000 subsidy essentially to help retrofit your home. So who's most in need? And he can set those criteria based on income, residency, or other appropriate characteristics that obviously don't fall under unlawful discrimination under federal or state law. And then there are some criteria as to what the penalty rate would be. The maximum penalty rate for funds that are overdue, we set in the ordinance at 10%, but there is nothing limiting the ability of the county administrator to assess those penalties or to use other tools that they currently use under Chapter 80 of the Betterments laws that essentially are our enforcement tool of creating these loans and allowing homeowners to take advantage of this in order to make sure folks pay. And again, folks that are more knowledgeable on this could talk about it more, but just in working with the Aqua Fund, there's a number of ways in which when a homeowner fails to pay on this loan, that loan is created as a lien against the property. So then the county does end up getting paid back when the property is sold. And it gets paid back with a certain amount of interest on the defaulted loans. Eligible uses, loans issued from the fund may be used to purchase and the installation of backup generators or battery storage systems, including necessary electrical upgrades, transfer switches, or other associated costs required to retrofit a residence. Again, that's speaking to the fact that it's helping you with a $5,000 payment to purchase the system, but also what's much more expensive is folks see the storm happen. They think, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had a generator? But it's not as easy as just going to Home Depot and buying a generator for a couple hundred or $2,000. There's significant costs that come with retrofitting the electrical systems in your home to make those systems actually be workable. And that is really the target here. It's that long-term, regardless of what system you have, backup resiliency, electrical retrofitting of the home that we're hoping to help people be able to afford. And that's a barrier to entry in terms of having some kind of resiliency infrastructure for these storms.
Well, you just mentioned that people could not buy a generator through Home Depot or some other retailer. Why is that?
No, people can. I more mean
Okay.
right now, if somebody on Cape Cod has a big storm and wants to buy a generator, they don't realize that there's much bigger. It's not like buying a lawnmower or snow blower. There's significant costs that come to actually retrofitting your home for electrical upgrades in order to then make that generator actually connect and work with one's home.
Well, I
those
mean,
are
that's not entirely true. I mean, you can buy a generator and plug all kinds of devices into it. You can plug a refrigerator into it. You can plug a space heater into it. There's a number of things you can do. I mean, I think the whole nature of these is they're temporary, so they're only going to run for a short period of time. I understand that, we had a severe storm that's pretty fresh in our memory. Prior to that, there hasn't been a significant storm where we had a lot of outages. We haven't had a hurricane on the Cape for 30 years. So I'm just wondering, what data do you have that has shown a need for this particular program? In other words, do we have something that shows people would put a generator in if they had a loan from somewhere to do it? Because this is very, very different than the Aqua Fund. I think you would agree.
Chair Gillen, I'm going through the line by line on the ordinance. Happy to talk bigger picture questions. Would you want me to step away from this and discuss the ordinance on its merits and the data behind it?
Well, it is. Like I said, I really wanted to understand the genesis of where we felt we needed this program in the county.
Absolutely. No, I think, as you mentioned, we had the tropical storm Hernando come through and hit Cape Cod pretty hard. We had hundreds of thousands of homes on Cape Cod without power for more than a week. At least my home here in our neighborhood was more than a week. I know the median time was about 5 days for the storm. It cost the county as well as towns in our community several $1 million to operate numerous warming shelters in order to provide folks resources in order to survive the storm, in order to stay warm. I know for one, we were fortunate in my home to have a generator because we were able to welcome neighbors in to stay warm and warm up. Because 1 or 2 day storms, you're right. That's something we're kind of used to on the Cape with a short-term power outage. But once you go 2-3 days without hot water, without running water in a lot of areas on the Cape, people were struggling, and it was a life-threatening scenario here. So the genesis of this ordinance, if you're asking, was really the thought process of, if we have a county, if we have resources and systems on Cape Cod that are spending millions of dollars in an emergency to make up for a lack of infrastructure, it might make sense for the county to set aside some small amount of money to see if we can make sure that the infrastructure that, my family is so lucky to have, and some families on the Cape that are fortunate or take for granted almost, are available to people not just who are wealthy, and people on the Cape who are struggling during these storms, and on whom we're already spending significant amount of resources to help them after the fact by fixing the issue rather than addressing it beforehand. Wouldn't it be great if we created a program that could help people plan ahead and make sure that their homes are resilient? So that was the genesis of it. And then to your question of would people actually use it? I think that's why we're creating a pilot program. I think we could spend more than $65,000 on a study that would tell us whether or not people would use it. But I think it might be good to set aside $65,000. If nobody uses it, great. We put it back in the general fund next year. And if people do use it, and if people benefit from it, great. That's already 12 families that benefited from it and are going to be more prepared for next year's storms. And then we can decide as an assembly based on that data whether it's something we should continue doing. That's my 2 cents. And I
Well,
would encourage the committee to recommend this ordinance favorably because of that.
We can, get into the details of how we would actually measure the success or failure of a pilot program, but it still goes back to the fact of how do we know that this money will actually tip the scale one way or another? I mean, we're talking about not a great deal of money. I mean, so do we know that people who really want a generator to put in, but they just can't afford it and they need a low interest loan? Because the fact is, I mean, it is not a significant amount of money, and the fact that this is probably going to save them maybe 3 or 4% in interest, and on a $5,000 loan, it's not a significant amount of money. And so I'm just trying to wrap my head around the fact, is this really going to make that much of a difference? Is it a fact that people can't put a generator in because they can't get $5,000? They can't go to the bank and get a loan at 9%, and the county will provide it at 4 or 5%. So is that really an incentive, or is it going to move the needle? Because it just seems like the county's going to take on a fair amount of administrative work to do this, because of course we're going to have to not just process a loan, but they're going to have to look at what's being put in, make sure it satisfies the requirements of the program, that the equipment they're putting in is actually qualifies. And then it goes beyond that to say, well, are we concerned with this equipment being maintained? Because this equipment has to be maintained every year. It has to be run, oil has to be changed, tune-ups, all those types of things to make sure that it is actually in working condition when the next storm rolls around. So it's slightly more complicated than I think you're laying it out to be. But I'm just trying to get to the point of, is this something the county should be involved in? And is this program going to really move the needle in terms of people saying, well, I can get a generator or I can't, based on the existence of this program?
Sure. Can I respond, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
please.
I think there is obviously a conversation that you're bringing up as to the percentage difference between what maybe in an ideal world a personal loan might be to do this, and also the difference between what percentage the county is going to be doing this at. And there is a good amount of empirical evidence to the fact that people, especially when people encounter issues with necessary home upgrades, issues that they believe are important for their families, that they're willing to invest money in and take out a loan for, and not just do with their disposable income, that folks necessarily don't always operate as purely rational consumers. And I would really compare this. I don't know personally, and I don't have data to put behind it, but I don't think an average person who wants to install a generator is necessarily going to be going to the bank and getting a personal loan and identifying the cheapest way to do it and going through all the hoops to do that. And you're going to end up with folks that are paycheck to paycheck in our communities, people that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it, taking on, if they believe that this is something they need after experiencing the storms we've had, credit card debt at interest rates that are significantly higher than anything we're talking about here, or that a bank could give, in order to make sure that their families are able to be safe and survive, or their grandparents on fixed incomes on Cape Cod are going to be able to be safe and survive and not feel like they are in jeopardy during the next storm. And again, I think, is there a good question to Delegate Killian whether or not the county should be doing it, or whether this is something the county should be doing? Well, that's an individual values judgment. That's why there's 15 of us on an assembly to vote whether or not we believe the county should be doing something like this. I personally do think the county should be doing it. And I do think there is merit to creating a program that incentivizes people to be proactive and advertises it and tells people you have opportunities to use this county resource, same as the Aqua Fund. The Aqua Fund, in one way, yes, it's a good financing mechanism, but in another way, it's there to help us make sure folks in our communities are being proactive about addressing the wastewater catastrophe that we're facing. It's not just there purely as a mathematical, oh, this is 2% cheaper than a bank loan. It's to tell people our communities are facing a wastewater catastrophe. We need to install this infrastructure so the county is willing to make your life easier if you need to apply for this and get this infrastructure built. I think when it comes to energy, it's really similar. The county is already paying, if you don't have a generator, make sure you have hot food and hot water. Honestly, paying significantly more than this program will ever cost to make that happen. And this is a way of making a one-stop shop where people, same as Aquafund, can really in a matter of days apply, hopefully, and install this necessary infrastructure in their home. Like the Aquafund, you get 3 quotes, you submit an application, and you can get the installation paid for, and then you pay it off slowly. Are there other ways to do this? I'm sure. But if it was an easy thing to do, and if it wasn't a necessary thing, then I wouldn't have had people in my home during the storm getting warm. And I think that's a story that a lot of us felt and saw.
Okay, but I understand that. But again, you're talking about choices that people make, and they can choose to have a generator or not have one. My point is, this is really not like the Aqua Fund, where the Aqua Fund is an emergency situation. The septic systems can fail overnight, render a home uninhabitable quickly, and the money required to get it fixed is much higher. Much more difficult for a homeowner to go to a bank and get private lending for that amount of money. Meanwhile, they can't live in their home. Totally different circumstance. This is a situation where these are choices that people can make on their own. They can weigh the cost benefit of investing the money in some backup power or not, taking the chance that the power is going to stay on. So I'm trying to get to the value of the county taking on this responsibility of administering another program where they have to now be in charge of what goes on, the equipment that's done, and there's a cost associated with that. And again, it's when you were talking about, again, relatively small amounts of loan, it's a very small amount of savings as well. I mean, we could probably do the same thing you mentioned about awareness is by having an awareness for people. Say, hey, these are the things you can do to have it to make your home more resilient for power outages in the future. So I've spoken a lot, but only because most of the people in this committee have signed on to this ordinance, so I figure they don't have as many questions. But I do see a lot of hands up, so Delegate Harder, if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Chair Killian. Yeah, Dan is great at doing the legal presentation and the government speak, and I'm the crazy person with the moods and the emotions. And it is terrifying for older people to be in their house without power. And you talk about the choices they make. People don't choose to be old and infirm and on a fixed budget and have their power go out for a week and have to either leave their home to go to a shelter with strangers, without their cats, it's terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying for these people. And yes, to a lot of people, buying a generator is affordable. It was to my mother, thank God, because my mother needed to be on oxygen at all times, which meant she needed to have an oxygenator, because otherwise people would have to come to her house 4 times a day with all the oxygen canisters that she needed. So she could afford to put in a full house generator. So we're very lucky. But other people that need oxygen for their health, they can't afford it. I mean, they really can't afford their groceries right now. And it's not their fault. It's not because they made bad choices in their lives. It's because they're a certain age, at a certain health level, and losing power is terrifying and incredibly dangerous for older people, depending on the situation. This storm, it was freezing cold if you didn't have energy. if your heat couldn't run. You could freeze to death in your home. In the summer, when we lose power, it doesn't have to be a hurricane. We had a tornado in Harwich. One bad nor'easter will lose power for a week. And in the summer, temperatures can go up to 120 degrees in the house if it's that hot and humid. So I'm coming from the emotional side of it. And if it costs the county $65,000 to help people and see if that works, instead of, this county's great at funding study and study and study. Program's a great way to see if it works. And if it costs the county $65,000 to try to help some older people be able to stay in their homes during, and survive a crisis, I don't see why that's not our business to try to help everyone we can. Thank you.
I'm not diminishing the importance of having backup power. I mean, I've had it myself. What I'm getting to is, will this actually move the needle? If we put a program in place, is it going to have any meaningful effect? And that's the question, because 5,000, it is a relatively small amount, but these systems can cost 10 to 15,000. So when you talk about affordability, is this really going to make that much difference? If people can't afford, a 15,000, is it making it 10,000 going to move the needle? I'm not sure it is. So again, I'm trying to get to the heart of the value of the county taking on this type of program.
But if the pilot program goes through and we find out most people come to us and say, I thought that was a really good idea, but I can't get this thing done for more than 12 and I just don't have it, then we'll rethink about maybe we should put in more of an initial fund so that we can lend people 10,000, because it really is, it's a safety thing. We have amazing people in the county emergency department. Each town has really good people, and we had shelters in the Lower Cape that had to keep getting moved because
I
one
understand that,
shelter's
Elizabeth,
power went out.
but look at this in
I
the
don't
big
see why
picture.
we can't help people.
If you wanted to be able to have enough generators out there to start closing shelters, how much money do you think we'd have to spend? Because if you're talking about $10,000 to $15,000 per household, and you have 50 people, 50 families coming to a shelter, I mean, that's a significant amount of money to provide generators to people so we can close a shelter. So I'm trying to look at this holistically.
Why? I think it's a fundamental difference in letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think anything we can do to help people, especially senior citizens, so that they can survive and thrive during a storm is a good thing for the county to do.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Green.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I was approached to support this, and I said no. I have a number of reasons why. Although I agree this storm was a hardship, and it was especially a hardship for my town, for Wellfleet. They shut down my entire town, and they didn't turn the power back on for 4 days. I mean, yes, we have elderly, we have low-income people, people were plowed, people who had snowplows had 70 people that they had on their list to plow out. I mean, it was absolutely a nightmare. But my whole town, my house got to 42 degrees. My entire town was shut down. I mean, $65,000 is pittance for what really should be.
Hi.
It's pittance. And what I'm saying is that we should be looking at this issue, but I don't think that this addresses the fundamental issues. I also think that, to philosophically put money, a lot of money, probably, if we found that this was helpful, and like you say, Chair Killian, I looked at it too, and about 15,000 average for a regular home or an average house. So, I mean, that would be a lot of money just to make my town whole. I don't see, and usually Wellfleet, because I have such a small vote. I mean, and we have so, we have fewer people than most
about,
towns.
15,000 average,
Very many people would
for
even
a
benefit
regular
from this.
home or an
Well, I
average
do
house.
think these issues need to be addressed.
So, I mean, that would be a lot of money just
I
to
don't think
make my town
philosophically that
whole.
we should be
I
supporting
don't see,
directions
and usually
that are
Wellfleet,
not,
because I have such a small
that are,
vote. I mean, and we have
fostering,
so,
the
we do,
continued use of
and
fossil fuels
about,
either.
15,000
So,
average,
very many people would
for
benefit
a regular
from
home
this.
or an
Well, I
average
do
house.
think these issues need to be addressed.
So, I mean, that would be a lot of money just to
I don't
make
think
my town
philosophically that
whole.
we should be
I
supporting
don't see,
directions,
and usually
that are not
Wellfleet, because I have such a small vote. I mean, and we have so,
well, I think
we do,
continued use of
and
fossil fuels
about,
either.
15,000 average,
Mostly,
very many people, for a regular home or an average house.
These issues need to be addressed.
So, I mean, that would be a lot of money just to make my town whole. I don't see, and usually Wellfleet, because I have such a small vote. I mean, and we have so, we do, and about, 15,000 average, very many people, for a regular home or an average house. So, I mean, that would be a lot of money just to make my town whole. I don't see, and usually Wellfleet, because I have such a small vote. I mean, and we have so, we do, and about, 15,000 average, very many people, for a regular home or an average house. So, I mean, that would be a lot of money just to make my town whole. I don't see, and usually Wellfleet, because I have such a small vote. I mean, and we have so, we do, and about, 15,000 average, very many people, for a regular home or an average house. So, I mean, that would be a lot of money just to make my town whole. I don't see, and usually Wellfleet, because I have such a small vote. I mean, and we have so, we do, and about, 15,000 average, very many people, for a regular home or an average house. So, I mean, that would be a lot of money just to make my town whole. I don't see, and usually Wellfleet, because I have such a small vote. I mean, and we have so, we do, and about, 15,000 average, very many people, for a regular home or an average house. So, I mean, that would be a lot of money just to make my town whole. I don't see, and usually Wellfleet, because I have such a small vote. I mean, and we have so,
Speaking of battery, Delta Gallagher would like to speak.
costs will be covered. It will, let's personalize this a little bit. My wife and I were also in our home. We lost power for 80 hours. Our entire town was shut down. We volunteered 12-hour days at the warming shelter at the Eastham Library. We encountered roughly 65, 70 members of the Eastham community who were in similar circumstances. And it taught us a lot about how people need to respond in this situation. Power outages are something that are still a fact of life here. Many people have generators. Many generators often don't function. People have solar power and backup batteries. You're right to point out that $5,000 may not be enough to really move the needle. If anything, What that says to me is the maximum loan amount in this program should not be $5,000. It should be more on the order of $15,000 or $20,000, and perhaps that would move the needle more. I would like to see that in this ordinance. I would rather see a higher amount. Delegate Gessen argued against it. He said, let's start small and see how it goes. If that's a problem, let's make it bigger. Let's make it more expansive. I also, as Delegate Gessen referred, I put forward the idea of making it a flexible interest rate. I consider the numbers there to be placeholders. I don't know that the county's cost of borrowing is the federal funds rate. We could talk to the treasurer, the finance officer, Coppola, and see, well, what rate does the county borrow at and what are the county's costs of lending? And we could put in real numbers that reflect the county's real circumstances on both those factors. In the end, this would be a revolving fund. I see it entirely as analogous to the Aqua Fund, that power resiliency or resiliency to power outages is a significant capital expense that many people in the county cannot afford on their own. And I think this is a benefit that the county is in a position to provide that commercial banks might be less willing. From my perspective, the role of the county is to do good for as many people as possible. And this is something that the county could do. Thank you.
No, I understand we want to help the public, but it's at what cost? I mean, it's I think oversimplifying to say that this isn't costing us anything. It is, but it is. We have to dedicate funds that we have to this particular program that we will not have to do something else with. So we have to look at it in terms of what we're going to do with that money. So, if we're going to dedicate it, say we spend the whole 65,000. Okay, we're taking out of an account that we're probably getting 4 or 5% on right now, and now we're going to charge it out at 1% over prime. So we're not going to have that money there. It's going to be a break even. So it's really not good to help reestablish the fund to any great extent. And obviously, as you continue, if you were to grow the account, it would certainly help, but it would definitely require outside funding to make this work in any meaningful way. And although I understand your opinion to raise the amount we were to loan out, it would then decrease the market penetration significantly because obviously we're going to be restricted on the money that we would have to spend. So if we're giving out 5,000 per home versus 15, means we're going to cut the number of homes we're going to touch by a third. So that's why I understand Mr. Gessen's desire to keep the loan amount a little or lower so that perhaps we can deal with more households. We'll move on, Mr. McElvey. I saw your hand up waiting patiently.
Yes, thank you, Delegate, for taking my questions and also just my comments. I'm also a sponsor of the legislation. Dan approached me, and I think it's a great idea. But I just want to say a few things, and I'll keep it brief. You mentioned moving the needle. How do we move the needle to make sure this is going to happen so people can get this? So I think that one way we do that is be responsible for making sure that if we do the pilot program, that people know there's a pilot program, that we get the word out to our towns, and we make sure that people know there's a program that you can tap into that's going to help you and going to provide some relief. And I know folks are, worried about it's only $5,000 with a little interest, but you don't have to get a whole house system. You can get a system that plugs into only certain things and the essentials. And for some people, that may be what they want and what is necessary for them to do. And another thing, as you're asking about why the county, well, if not the county, who? Our towns aren't doing this that I know of. The state's not doing this that I know of. We have an opportunity for just a pilot program. And if we don't like it at the end of the year, if it doesn't work at the next fiscal year, whenever we re-up this, we can revisit it. So I think it's worth a try, and I appreciate everyone's consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate. And I think I go back to the old adage when it comes to government: are we filling a need or creating one? And that's will be the question here with this program. I see.
Can I just say one more thing? I think we'll help people with the need. I'm going to tell just a quick story. A couple years ago, I think the same tornado that went through Harwich came through Mashpee. I had some neighbors one street over, a couple that the lady was on oxygen, and they had to evacuate
Mhm.
And one reason they did that is because they didn't have a generator, and when they didn't have a generator, because of cost. So I think it would be a help to the community. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Delegate Green, you got your hand up again?
I do. Thank you for calling on me yet again. So just a quick background for myself that the newer members might not know. In the 70s, I did build what is now known as a net zero house in Wellfleet. I was the director of an environmental education school. I've been on the Energy and Climate Action Committee in my town for many years, and I'm really into this. And I'm vice chair of this committee because I've asked to, because I do have some background in this, and I am very concerned about these issues. And I'm not saying that we don't address them. I do think that, on the Outer Cape, which used to be called the Lower Cape, it's now the Outer Cape, we do lose our power quite a lot, and more so than other areas on the Cape. And we can be out of power for quite a number of days. So, I am very concerned about this, but I do understand, the bigger dynamics here. And I think that's what we should be really addressing. The electric companies are putting stumbling blocks, for us to do the right things, and the state isn't stepping up. And I do think that, there is going to be an increase in electric demand according to ISO New England and other entities. And the electric companies can step up here. And I think we should be bringing them in and talking with them. And also people from the state, I think we should bring them in too, because there
Okay,
could be some
I'm gonna stop.
subsidies for that.
I'm going to stop you there,
Okay.
Lily, because
Okay.
we
Okay.
are going to bring some of those folks in, and we do have one more agenda item. So I'm going to let Delegate Gessen have some final words here.
Thank you, Chair Killian. And I think you've raised some concerns, and I think Delegate Green have raised some concerns, and delegates have just spoken about the question that comes up whenever there's discussion about creating a new program, right? The county is really a collection of programs that have hobbled their way through the end of the 20th century into the 21st century, from the dredge to the registry of deeds, and they all interweave together. And you're right, the county doesn't necessarily have an identity that we can, an emission statement where we can identify exactly what it is we should be doing at all times to guide us in this kind of situation. And I think the questions and the concerns that delegates have today are specifically with this program, asking the bigger question of what role the county has to play. If the role of the county is to make sure that every single homeowner on Cape Cod is taken care of in every single way, we're failing at that, and we're never going to be able to achieve it. The CEO of Eversource made more last year in income than the registry of deeds brought in for the county, right? There's matters of scale here. But the fact of the matter is, if our role is to maximize the return on our money, then I also think, yeah, maybe the approach is let's keep our money in the highest interest rate bearing account and let it accrue and grow and grow and grow. And let's not let a penny sneak out through the programs that we have. But if our program and our mission as the Barnstable County government, the regional government of Cape Cod, whatever name it goes by, is to help Cape Codders to identify needs in our communities and to find ways to fill those needs by leveraging the fact that we are the only regional government left in Massachusetts, then I think this is precisely the kind of program we should be doing. By setting aside a small amount of money, we're going to be able to see, without doing a study, without necessarily waiting for an insane amount of data, without waiting for Eversource to tell us whether or not we're allowed to do this, we are going to see if we can help 13 families over the course of 12 months. 13 families that are not going to have to worry that they won't have power come the next storm. And then once we've helped those 13 families, we can sit back on this Zoom and discuss what went well, what didn't go well, what we can improve, what we should change. Should we increase the amount we give? Should we take the amount to a lower interest rate? Should we advertise differently? There's a lot of good conversation to be had. But I don't see a benefit to sitting here and waiting for a slew of information and for people to spew or come and espouse, whether or not this is a good idea because they have expertise in this field and that field. and to tell us to wait and see and so forth. I think for once, it's a good idea for the county to go out there and see whether or not a program like this will benefit people in our community. Because I do think there's a need for this in our community. I think we all saw the need for it in our community. So again, I would recommend or urge the delegates of this committee to recommend this favorably for the full assembly, so other delegates get an opportunity to weigh in, and we can put this to a vote, and we can start helping folks, hopefully before it starts snowing again.
Thank you, Delegate Gessen. Delegate Frizel, 30 seconds.
Sure. I just want to add that a reason I co-sponsored is what we saw this past winter, according to what I'm reading from climate experts, is what we can expect increasingly with climate change to occur in the future. This is not an isolated once in a 20-year kind of event. It's going to happen more frequently. So I thought it would be at least worth a try to see if we could do something. What I'm hearing today from those who are opposed to some extent is that it's not big enough. So maybe we need to improve that part of the program. So I'm not sure, it's ready for final vote. Maybe it needs a little more time to mature and marinate. But I hope the idea is not voted down. Thank you.
Well, the intent is we're going to have some people from Eversource in at our next hearing to talk a little more in detail about grid resiliency. Okay, that being said, we're going to move on to the next item, which is the discussion regarding future Assembly, Telecommunications, and Energy Subcommittee meetings on broadband. We intend to, I know many of you have been here before, we've had some discussions, it's been a while. We had members from both Open Cape and Verizon in to talk about the situation. I know there was money available. That whole process seemed to have stopped in its tracks. I don't see much happening. So we're going to try and, pull this back in and maybe have some further discussions. I think Owen has lined up Steve Tupper to come in and give us kind of an update on where they are, but to see if maybe we can move this thing along, because not much has been happening on that. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Delegate Green?
Of course, you knew I would have some thoughts on this. Yes, I do. So in Wellfleet, Verizon, this was one of the towns that Verizon chose out of the three to get that the grant that they got. I haven't heard much about it, so I would like to have Verizon come back. And also, I know that Open Cape's management has changed, and I think that Open Cape should come back as well. So those three I would highly support coming in. Thank you.
Okay, that is part of the plan, to bring in many people. This will be several meetings. We're not going to just cram it all into one. We'll have several, and hopefully as each meeting goes, we'll find some other avenues of inquiry. Delegate Hardy, you had your hand up. Did you?
I just wanted to make sure that, we were going to have certain people there, because I do think, it's time for reckoning with some people about why they keep promising, and then they don't deliver. So I will support as many meetings as we can have. Thank you.
Yeah, we have spent money to study the problem, as we all know, and not too much has come out of that. So it'll be nice to see how, if anything, is going on. We'll also have the Cape Cod Commission in, because they were the ones who did some studying. If there is nothing further, then we'll move to adjourn. We've got a quick 10 minutes before the next meeting for many of us.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Who made the motion? Who's an
Delegate-
alternate?
the
I don't
delegate
even know
from
that you
Mashpee.
need a motion to adjourn, but
Okay, not anymore?
Well,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Moved and seconded by.
well, to be safe, would you like a roll call, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, what the heck? That doesn't cost us anything.
Sure. Chair Killian,
Yes.
Vice Chair Green,
Yes.
Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate King,
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher.
Yes.
That's 5, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thanks you, everyone.
Thank you.
Jim. Thank you.
And Delegate Killian, do you know when the next meeting of Telecom is going to be?
I don't. Maybe Owen will know better than that, but he's working on that schedule. I know he's gotten the contacts for the utilities and we're trying to get that scheduled. So it's really going to come down to when they can meet with us.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.